All right. What's on your mind?
It's parent life. What is on my mind lately? Honestly, weirdly, with so many things happening, I feel very centered,
Yeah.
very middle pillar. I don't know if it's because Kabbalah is coming in a week,
Mm.
because that energy always just sets in. Granted, I'm not doing it, but I'm with Casey facilitating and just being in the energy. I can feel myself just very grounded right now. And it kind of feels nice. I don't let my mind get wrapped up in the worry of say the product. I know we talked about it last time, but sure, there's a lot of things that have to get done for it when it arrives, and I do feel like there's obviously some pressure there to get my marketing and sales going and everything for it. But also I don't feel any imbalance in my nervous system, which is nice. I just feel like we talked about this before, but I've done enough things now that have failed or that I've learned from, that of course there's always more to learn, but I feel settled in my energy and knowing that I can pretty much accomplish anything. I can make anything happen. So I don't feel the anxiousness of having to launch this product. Whereas, say, back when I was starting my personal training career, there was a lot of anxiety of oh my God, how do I even do this? How do I even pay my taxes now being self-employed? Those types of things. So I don't know. I feel very centered right now. How about you?
Actually, also really centered, but that's a day to day. I'm very conscious of. Some days I won't feel as centered. Other days I will.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a huge aha moment yesterday morning because I have my full-time job and I am trying to get out of that. Right.
Right.
I have a goal of December to switch to my business full time. So some weeks I'll be totally fine, managing both, totally okay, all good. And then other weeks or days, I'm man, I'm so ready for this, senioritis feeling, ready for this to be done.
Yeah.
A little resentful that I don't have the daytime hours to work on the business and I got to do it in the morning, do it in the evening. And I'm if I only had these additional 10 hours, I could do so much more. And it's a little bit of a whiny thought.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this book right now by the former CEO of Pepsi. And she was an immigrant woman. And the story is, it starts as her story as an immigrant working her way up in corporate America. This is in the 70s, 80s, 90s, where she would look around and be not only are there not very many other people of color, but there's no women in leadership positions. Right. And every time she would get into a new level of seniority, the air would get a little bit thinner in terms of female role models around her to kind of model how to be a mother and a corporate executive at the same time. And so that's kind of why she wrote the book, because it's more common now and it's always helpful to have examples.
Mm-hmm.
But she's just talking about the women and immigrant part of it aside, she's talking about how at one point she was the VP of strategy for Pepsi, but then they added on, they made her the CFO, and then from CFO, they made her president. And during this time, the load of the other two positions didn't go away. And so she's talking about when you think of Pepsi, you think of a drink, but Pepsi is really it's Quaker Oats. It at one time was Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC.
Yeah.
It's Tropicana orange juice. It's Frito-Lay's. It's all these brands. And she's talking about okay, at one time we, the restaurant business wasn't doing well. It was a third of our revenue. It's a $10 billion portfolio. And I need to figure out what to do with this. And then, all of a sudden the government is on us because we just bought Quaker Oats and they think we have a monopoly with Gatorade. And now I need to deal with this. And she's talking about how these things stack up. And before the next thing added on, that current project, $10 billion focused decision was taking all of her time.
Mm-hmm.
And now the additional project, which is equally huge in scope, is also another full-time job. And she's like, at each stage, my conception of efficiency was challenged, and I had to figure out how to get even more efficient. And I'm like reading this and I'm like, dude, fucking do better. Like, what are you internally, mentally complaining about? Like, oh, you have a full-time job and then you have a business on the side and you can't manage the two. Figure it out. Like, you can do this.
I think there's a level of, I think there's two components to that of, yes, finding more efficiency. Like, I've had to do it with having kids. Like, I have to be more efficient. There's just no getting around it. I don't have more hours in the day. I have less hours in the day because I'm with the kids. And then also understanding, I think, how to expand your energy where you're getting also efficiency, but it's like you're getting more quantum hours out of the day as opposed to just the matrix hours, let's call it. So I think there's a level of expansion. I think that's why, for me and Casey, why a spiritual practice is so important. I think it is for you too, because that sort of expands your quantum energy and your quantum container to be able to do more in the physical.
I think what you mean, so like this might be an example, is yesterday, I was like, whatever, 3 or 4 o'clock, and I had to like really proofread a contract before it went out. And my mind, I was like, I don't fucking want to do this because it's like really detailed and I could see that some things were wrong and I'm like, oh my God. So I just like closed my laptop and I meditated for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. Like all I did was count my breath up till 10, back down to 1, open my laptop again and kept moving. Yeah. And I felt like when I do that through the day, that makes me more efficient. That makes me more productive versus just like this bleeding downhill energy through the day.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a level of self-awareness to be like, oh, I'm frustrated right now. Oh, I'm not giving this the level of attention that it requires. I'm being fucking whiny in my head.
Yeah.
I need to pause. And you can find 5 minutes to pause.
Totally.
So that's one thing. I'm very excited about it. I'm like reading this book and I'm like, oh my God, dude. So I've mentioned on the podcast before, like the level of the word rigor is in my head. It's like tattooed on my forehead right now, my third eye. And remember when I told you that I went from Colorado to Harvard? What would get you an A at Colorado will get you like maybe a D+ or a C- at Harvard. And
you're pretty much failing at Harvard.
Yeah. And I'm like, Jesus, like this, okay, this is another level of rigor.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I will look at my friends that graduated from the Harvard environment and went and did like Big 3 consulting or whatever it is. And I look down on that for so long. Like, oh my God, you work at McKinsey. You're such a fucking dweeb. Like, are your parents proud of you? Like you fucking, but that was my ego defending itself for making different decisions. But now I look at them and I'm like, wow, they were immersed in a level of professional rigor for the last 10 years that I was in a different way, but I had to bring that out internally because as an entrepreneur, there was really no external pressure putting that. You have to create the thing into the world and all the pressure has to come from within. Whereas if you're at McKinsey and you're like 25, 26, 30, whatever age, but especially fresh out of college, you have this whole hierarchy that is coming down on you and telling you like sink or swim. And those are your two options.
Yeah.
And if you end up swimming, you become a professional badass in many, many ways because the intensity of the work, it's so hard. And a part of me has been really conscious of just re-elevating, trying to surround myself with that level of pressure because I don't work in a corporate environment. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, how do I manufacture that level of pressure on myself? because I know that makes me better.
Yeah.
So like when I'm reading this book, for example, I'm like, I put it down and I'm like, dude, okay, this presentation can be better. This spreadsheet can be better. I need to prepare more for this sales pitch. Like I need to dial whatever I thought preparation was going into this next day or today. No, there's levels better to this. How do I make this better? Better, 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 better. And so I'm trying to elevate this level of rigor. And I imagine that you do this with, well, what I've seen you do it with more than anything is like when you set up the cameras and you don't like how a thing looks, right? You're like constantly applying the same sort of principle, which is like, no, I think this can be better.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to purposefully ratchet up the intensity of being like, trying to avoid the internal dialogue of like, no, it's okay. You're okay. No, fuck off.
God, me and you are doing the exact same things right now. I don't know if it's just because we're in each other's energy field or because we are both essentially starting new businesses again. But that's what I'm doing too. I'm trying to ratchet it up, but I'm also trying to do it in like a constructive, positive way too, and not just like put this pressure on myself, like the type of pressure that you might get at McKinsey or something.
Right.
You know, trying to maintain a level of positivity to it, but also not going easy on myself at the same time, you know. Yeah. So funny. I love that. I love rigor and ratchet right now. Two great words that are going. We got to ratchet this shit up and we got to bring the rigor. Like, yeah. But also be cool through it all.
Did I tell you I've been writing an email to myself every day?
No, tell me about this.
Okay, so maybe a few weeks ago, I started, right? Like I've described on this podcast, I have a way that I do my to-do list, right? Like I define tasks versus needle movers, and that's fine. But then I was like, a to-do list is such a lame way to frame something, you know? And I was like, what are my commitments to myself today? Like, what am I committing to myself?
Mm-hmm.
Forget other people. And so every morning, the first thing that I'm doing or trying to do the first thing is I'm just writing an email to myself. I'm like, good morning, dude. Feeling kind of X, Y, and Z today. And I'm writing, these are my personal values. You know, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to dig for clarity and not make assumptions. I'm going to keep my word, right? And then I say, all right, these are my commitments to myself. I'm going to hit this workout. I'm going to hit this workout. 100% of those workouts, AKA I'm not going to get to halfway and be like, I'll do the second half tomorrow or something like that. I'm going to achieve this on my power list. I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And they're not all professional. They're just commitments to myself. Meditate. I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes today. And then when I go to sleep, I open it back up. And it's effectively a to-do list, but I've phrased it differently to myself.
Yeah.
And now I have to say, did I keep my own word to myself?
Mm-hmm.
And man, do I not ever want to write an email where I have to say, you didn't keep your word to yourself. I've had to do it twice. But I was talking to my business coach about it. I was like, on Tuesday, I had to write, you know, my head wasn't 100% in the game and I didn't keep a couple commitments to myself. And I said, the value in the exercise is me admitting that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just rolling into the next day and, you know, mentally being like, it's okay, you know, have some kind of lazy mental dialogue and move into the next day just so I don't have to feel too uncomfortable about it. No, I wrote the email, I put those things in red, and I said I did not keep my commitment to myself on these two things. I think this is why, but it didn't happen, and stop. Boom. That's the value of it. It's holding myself accountable, being willing to say, this is what I set out to do and this is what happened. I don't need to feel tremendously shitty about it, but I do need to have the proper checks and balances with myself to then move into the next day. And I feel like doing things like that that's how you avoid walking through life in this sleepy pattern, waking up 10 years later and being like,
What have I done?
what did I even do?
Yeah.
And feeling like I didn't give it my best effort, feeling like I left something on the table. This is my personal checks and balances to ensure that I don't have that energy in my life.
Do you ever, I saw Scott Sims, Uphill, What You Like to Wear. He posted a really thoughtful thing the other day about he felt like he was, to paraphrase, getting a little bored because he's getting good at something, so it doesn't take him as much time, or he's just getting faster at it. And I found that so interesting because in what you're saying and what's been happening with me lately is having this to-do list and becoming so much faster and really good at some of the things that I need to get done, that I get it done efficiently. And then I'm in this place of I need to ratchet it up and get more done. But then all of a sudden I have a little time on my plate because I've gotten really efficient and good at these tasks on my to-do list. Giving myself some grace to be like, okay, take a little time for yourself then. Don't do anything right now. But then also being in this gear of, I got to ratchet it up and get going. So what else can I do? Do you find that in yours at all? Like say with your side hustle or your side business that you're doing now, I imagine over the course of the last 8 months, you've gotten faster at certain tasks you need to do for it.
Yes. It's never about tasks, so I'm mentally reframing it a little bit.
Yeah.
But if I find myself, I use that as a reward. Like if I've kept all my commitments to myself and it's like 5 o'clock, like yesterday, I think it's always funny to think about it, but it was like 7 p.m. and I was like, oh, I finished everything. I guess there's nothing left to do. Let me chill.
Yeah.
And my mind is like, oh,
Are you able to go into that chill mode pretty fast, or does it kind of take a minute for your mind to like settle into that and be like, oh, I don't have anything to do right now?
Yeah. So I have to watch myself and be like, oh no, you're good.
Yeah.
You don't need to like make more shit up to do.
That's what I do too.
And, but then there's there's productivity in that.
Yeah.
I hate the word productivity, but there's value in then going for my walk or, with Heather and reflecting on the day and getting the space, because it's not, like I said, it's not about getting more efficient at the task. Like tasks are just like, those are the things that need to be done. Without space, there's no way to reflect and really assess, how am I moving the thing forward? There's an objective. Am I just doing busy work all day?
Right.
Or am I actually doing the right things?
Yeah.
And without reflection, there's no way to genuinely assess whether that's happening. So like, yes, you can apply rigor in ratcheting it up, not just to accomplishing sets of tasks, but also to your level of reflection.
Right.
Right? To honesty with oneself. Apply a higher level of rigor to my self-evaluation. Have I been showing up at the level? Am I directing my energy in the right directions? Or am I just falling into patterns of doing what's most comfortable? When the reward may be in doing more of something I'm not as good at or uncomfortable or avoiding.
Do you have any specific like benchmarks or targets as far as your own personal business that you're building signal you're like heading in the right direction? Not like, I know on a daily basis, it's about keeping those commitments to yourself, reflecting, being honest with yourself. But what are some more like practical, tangible things that you sort of benchmark out that when you're growing a business, what do you look at?
Yeah, I have good, better, best KPIs for the profit and loss. So, this month, the good, better, best was close 5 contracts. Better is 7, best is 10. and literally everything should be geared towards that. We had a certain like retention target with a good, better, best. Same thing. Are we on track to do those things? Like all tasks and activities stem from those targets.
Yeah.
Same thing in the full-time job, right? We have like close X number of deals. It's the OKRs exercise that I think I've done with you. There's always objectives, like 3 to 5 objectives, and then yes or no key results on whether we've achieved the objective or not. And that's what the 3-week sprints are about. So the first week is like we're going into a fresh week next week to start October. So I'm doing a bunch of reports, kind of evaluating the last 3 weeks or getting things through the line so that next week as a team, we can say, how do we do last month against what we set out to do? And what do we need to focus on for the coming month? And it's always grounded in numbers. Anything else is just like pretending to play business. If business is about making money,
Yeah.
what the fuck else are you doing here?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a hobby, which is fine.
But don't call it a business.
Business is meant to make money.
Yeah.
And how you make the money and the energy you make the money in, those are all applicable and valid. And also so yeah, KPIs for sure. I won't go too deep into it, but like the better that you can measure all desired outcomes and have a repeating mechanism to have an eye on the health score of whatever aspect of the business it is, the better off you are. I've never seen anybody that it's really hard to even come up with metrics sometimes. What's the right metric?
I mean, I'm in year 4 here at the studio, and I still struggle sometimes with like, what is the right metric? It's kind of like evolving all the time, or maybe it's like one metric works one year, but then it doesn't work kind of the next year. Does that happen with you?
Yeah, they're always evolving, and how you calculate a metric evolves because you get better at understanding like, okay, so we got this 9 out of 10 score, but this thing still happened, so our equation does not factor that in. So we need to iterate how we calculate this metric. And that's the job. That's literally that's why we have this process of, establish the goal, execute against the goal, reflect against our performance, then reestablish the goal, execute the goal, evaluate. And it's just this never ending flywheel. That's how you get better at things.
Yeah.
So it applies to the metrics as well. Oh man. Okay. So I have a question. Heather asked me this question as we were getting ready this morning, and I was like, this is a big one. And she's like, so how, we hire on core values and we do, we only take on clients that share our core values. Like, is that the same for friends?
I think to a degree.
Okay, what's the degree?
As in everything, there's a spectrum. I mean, I think the obvious core values have to be there of like, can I trust you? Are you honest? Are you authentic? Are you working on yourself? But as far as like, this is a shitty example, but this is just what's coming to mind. Like, just because I don't talk about sports much anymore or follow up much anymore, if you happen to be somebody that still follows sports more or follows football, then okay, fine, whatever. Like, sure, that's cool. But that's not really a core value of mine. But I think the main ones have to be there. Like, be authentic, don't have any masks on, be honest, keep working on yourself, keep growing. There's, we talked about this way back of like, because you said it with your marriage, you needed to find somebody that was willing to grow together. Period. That's like the number one thing. Just keep growing. That's probably the one thing I can't be around much anymore, is if you're just not committed to growing in some form. But I think I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I can't do it because then what am I making that time for with that person if they're not feeding me on all those levels? And vice versa, if I'm not feeding them, I don't know. What about you?
Kind of like that.
It's
So I think you were describing your personal values as as you went deeper into the list. But the first one with trust, I thought was really interesting, which I think is effectively the best way to sum it all up.
It really comes down to that.
person?
I actually was going to talk about this on make a short form for about me and Casey of like our relationship. But it's like, you hear it all the time, but all the things boil down to trust.
Mm-hmm.
Can I trust what you're telling me is your honest perspective, truth, whatever you want to call it? Can I trust what you're communicating to me is what you believe?
Mm-hmm.
Can I trust that you're continually working on yourself to become a better person?
Mm-hmm.
Can I trust the obvious, the simple one? Can I trust that you're out in the world and not cheating on me? Or, it all comes down to trust.
Mm-hmm.
If that trust is gone, like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like friendships, relationships, business partnerships. Now, can it come back? Sure. Yeah. But it's a tell sign that if you're still sort of always suspect about something, even in the slightest bit, even if it's just like 0.5%, I can't move forward with that anymore. Which, truthfully, looking back at some of my old relationships, I bet a lot of people couldn't trust me because I was a shitty human being.
Mm-hmm.
And probably why a lot of those friendships aren't there anymore. Not because I decided to walk away from them. They probably decided to walk away from me.
And I think all the rest of the list that you described are basically like manifestations of how they're basically data points on that in some equal how much I can trust you or not. Like, we are doing that subconsciously all the time.
Yeah.
And if we can articulate what our values are, then at least we can maybe challenge our own feelings in certain scenarios. For example, sometimes we're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes our instincts about a situation are wrong because we have our own shit, right? Which is why it's good to have articulated core values. But yeah, it's all about trust. So the conversation went with like, she was like, well, what about politics? And my initial answer was like, if I had to agree on politics unanimously with my friends and family, I'd have nobody in my life.
Yeah. I listened to a really good podcast the other day. I'll send it to you. And he was talking about it a little bit. I can 100 now, as I've done some work and grown older and matured a little bit, I could care less about somebody's political views. And not in the sense of like, I don't care what you believe in, or I don't care how you feel about something. In the sense of, I don't care, like, everybody has come from so many different backgrounds that at this point I'm like, I can probably find the root as to why you believe the way you believe, and I'm cool with that because that's how you grew up, or that's the environment you were in, or that's the people you were around, or that's how it affected you through your life, or whatever. Politics, I'm cool with, whatever.
Yeah.
Go whatever side you want. I get it. But if you're a shitty human being,
yeah,
that's where I draw the, like, if you can't understand my side, or if you can't be kind to another human being who has a different political view than you, that's when I'm like, well, you're shitty. That sucks.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like,
so this is interesting because I had the same answer. I was like, I can pretty much understand why somebody, if I sit down and talk to somebody, I can understand how they got to their opinion, even if I disagree with it.
Yeah.
Even if it frankly bothers me, I can still like put that aside and understand how you got there.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, so then what's up with that? Because a lot of people, I think, then conflate the two. They think that, and this is where we get into trouble, which is because you have a certain political belief on a particular issue, I can't trust you.
Yeah.
right? I think that's how the majority of people
That's a
treat
really good point.
political stances.
Yeah.
And I've seen friendships break up because of this. And when you pull out objectively, it's like, whoa, that's a really small thing. In fact, you don't even deal with that on a day-to-day in your life. Like, I'm not going to, it's hard not to get into specifics here, but whatever political issue comes to mind, when I say political issue, whatever the first thing that comes to your mind is, there are friendships that have broken up
I know.
about that topic, and the odds that those these are called like single issue voters. I've told you about the debate. Like when we were at Harvard, there was a guy who was a clerk for a Supreme Court justice, and we were at the bar and we debated all night about abortion. And I basically agreed with this guy on almost everything. But on abortion, he was just vehemently against it. Like point blank period. I cannot, no, doesn't matter if it's rape at week 1 versus month 9, like abortion is wrong. All.
Just out of curiosity, what was his defense of, say,
He's
like
Catholic.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it?
That's it. And that is and therefore he can never vote for anybody that is okay with abortion to any degree. And so that is his single issue. And a lot of people have single issues, whatever it may be. It may or may not be abortion. But what single issues tend to be, I have noticed, tend to be around topics that aren't what we come across day to day. Like, I'm not dealing with abortion every day. He's not dealing with abortion every day. Or it could be immigration, or it could be Israel-Palestine right now, right? It could be police brutality. A white 52-year-old female living in the suburbs of Minneapolis, if I break up a friendship over police brutality in Ferguson, Missouri, like what's actually happening there?
Yeah.
When was the last time you dealt with that?
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm not diminishing. I actually respect that you're so passionate about that issue because you understand and have empathy that it impacts other people in a very real way. But it's just very interesting to me how we deem people unworthy of respect because they disagree with you on just one single issue. Like that guy that I'm talking about, I basically think his stance on abortion is crazy. Wow, I'm saying that in public on a podcast. I don't know if that's great, but like I absolutely don't agree with him. But I still have like the utmost respect for him.
Yeah.
Like I would love to sit down and have another conversation with him, and I honestly would still trust him.
Yeah.
I actually still trust him.
I actually would probably trust him more because he's so like he stands behind what he's saying. Like,
yeah, he's principled.
Yeah, he's principled on it. He's like, no, this is what I believe in. This is, and I'm sure up to the point of, say, the rape in first week, would you say he had some, I guess you're saying it was only because he was Catholic though, but were there any other valid points that you're like, oh, cool, I can get on board with that. I understand like where that came from.
Probably. I mean, we sat there and did that all night long. And it was one of those classic movie scenes where like others joined in around the table and it became this big discussion. And I know different people were upset, but I was just able to appreciate the fact that we were willing to sit there all night and discuss the issue rather than
write somebody off,
start writing each other off, start saying that the other person was a fucking idiot or a fucking piece of shit or like there was no level of vitriol. And there's so many issues basically on the list that I just mentioned where if I'm not in the right frame of mind, I can get triggered, right? Yeah. On any one of them. But I always want to challenge myself to not do that. I mean that's where we're at. So anyways, with friendships, I feel like you said, it's a spectrum, and especially with politics, it's like I just want to come from a place of understanding. We've talked about it in past podcasts. If I want to change somebody's mind or if I want to inch them towards me a little bit, I'm not going to be able to shame them into seeing my perspective. I have to see their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
They need to feel like I see their perspective in order for them to open up and then maybe see my perspective as well.
And really, like, I don't even care about inching people towards my perspective anymore.
No, yeah, not at all.
Like, that's such a, like, what a tell of our ego. Like, I need you to believe what I believe.
Well, there are certain things I think where I would like to inch people towards my perspective. There's life and death in this world. We just don't interact with it on a day to day. And so there are, like, dude, there's billions of people that suffer deeply on a day to day basis. And then there's millions that are dealing with atrocities right now are deeply suffering. And our policies in this country affect that. And therefore, I do believe it's our civil responsibility to be politically engaged to a degree, to vote, to do all those things, because we don't know, but our opinions actually have far sweeping impact. And so, like,
go hang out in a couple other countries and see what the perspective and talk and conversation is like about America when you're not in it.
Right.
It's very different.
It's very different. It's different than even it was 20 years ago. We used to be the coolest thing in the world, and now not so much. So, yeah, I do want people to adopt my views on certain things, but I'm also willing to believe that maybe my views aren't 100% correct either. So there's the give and take, but I think that give and take is like, and
that give and take comes from actually having like understanding conversations with people as opposed to just judgmental conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. See you next time.
Bye, Faiez.
Bye.